Jennifer Crowley. She's the founder
Oh,
of
yeah.
So yeah. All right, well, it is 7, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started if you're ready, Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Good evening, everyone. A few quick thank yous before we start. A quick thank you to Jen Crowley, the group's founder, for everything she does behind the scenes to make these chats possible. A special thank you to all of the moms who have already read Once There Were Wolves, have recommended it to their friends, shared the love within the Facebook group, and who are here with us live tonight. And for the moms whose lives are just really busy and are going to catch this on the recording, we appreciate you circling back and welcome. So. Today, we are so excited to be speaking with Charlotte McConaghy regarding her novel, Once There Were Wolves. By way of introduction, Charlotte is an Australian living in Sydney with her partner and son. She has a master's degree in screenwriting from the Australian Film, Television and Radio School, and a number of published SFF works in Australia. Her novel, Migrations, was her first foray into the adult fiction world, and it was an instant national bestseller, Amazon editors pick for best book of the year in fiction, a Time magazine best year book of the year, and the #1 Indie Next pick for August 2020. It's being translated in 20 languages and is currently set to be adapted for film. And fueled by her love of nature and her interest in stories of fierce women, McConaughey's newest novel, Once There Were Wolves, was an instant New York Times bestseller, a Book of the Month Club selection, and #1 Indie Next pick. So welcome, Charlotte. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here to chat.
Yeah, well, so for our members who might not have had the opportunity to read Once There Were Wolves already, just give us the synopsis of the book in your own words.
Sure. So it's basically Once There Were Wolves is the story of Inti Flynn, who is a biologist charged with reintroducing wolves into the Scottish Highlands in order to kind of bring that landscape back to life. And she faces a lot of pushback from the locals who are, it's quite a densely kind of packed farming community there. So they're understandably concerned about reintroducing a predator that might kind of go after their livestock. And then Inti kind of gets even more embroiled when she discovers the body of a farmer that's been, mauled to death. So she thinks, and she's determined that the wolves didn't make the kill. But she knows that that's where the town will lay blame. So she kind of does something very reckless to protect the wolves. It's a bit of a love story. It's a murder mystery. It's a story of sisters and family and I guess what that means. It's, I think, ultimately the story of not only rewilding a landscape, but rewilding ourselves as well.
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. So, well, when you first started writing, I think you were writing more young adult novels, and then you made the switch into adult fiction with Migrations. And what would you say is the difference between writing for younger or older audiences?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I started out as a very young person myself. So I was 14 when I started writing my first book. So naturally, it was for kids. I got a little bit older and I moved into that sort of YA realm. I think for me, the rule I try to follow is just to always write the book that I want to read. So I think naturally my writing style has shifted over the last, oh God, I guess 15 years. I would say, though, writing any story is fundamentally very similar in that you kind of want to push yourself to really be truthful and honest. Writing in genre can be quite different from writing straight fiction. So a lot of my earlier stuff was fantasy, sci-fi. You can have a lot of fun in those genres and you can kind of go a bit nuts and really just enjoy the escapism and the adventure of it. And you can kind of, you don't have to be held back by anything other than your imagination. Whereas I found when I shifted into writing straight fiction, that it challenged me pretty intensely because I felt like I was kind of contained within this one character, and it was harder to sort of, I wasn't jumping around to lots of characters and lots of different places in a world, and I didn't have sort of, huge action sequences that I could sort of just, hide behind. It was very intimate, just being with this woman, and that's what I do find about writing fiction for adults, that I do have to really dig very deep, and kind of allow that vulnerability to sort of, I guess, rise to the surface in a way that maybe I didn't in my earlier work. Yeah, I might wind up writing some more genre fiction one day, who knows?
Oh, that would be interesting. So for those of us who have loved your two adult fiction novels, is there one of your YA ones that you think that we should go and check out, or?
Oh, well, there's probably two series, either of which, you could dabble in. It's much older work from me, so I was a lot younger. I will just preface that. There's one series called The Cure, which is kind of dystopian sci-fi, and then there's another series which is high fantasy, called The Chronicles of Kaya. So, depending on what your taste is, you could start out with either one of those.
Okay, we'll definitely have to check those out. So what would you say was the inspiration for Once There Were Wolves?
Well, I was actually reading an article, about Pando the trembling giant, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is the largest and oldest living organism on the planet. It's this incredible, forest of quaking aspen trees in Utah, but except that it's not a forest, it's one tree, with identical shoots that are all connected to this amazing, huge root system under the ground. And some scientists think that it's been, around for nearly 1 million years. So it's very, very ancient, and it started to die because of human impact on its environment. And at the bottom of this article, it said that a really simple, elegant solution for this problem, to keep this, incredible forest alive, would be to reintroduce wolves back into it. But that would never happen because of the pushback from the locals. And so that kind of got me started on this really, I was fascinated by the idea that wolves could save a forest. And so I went into this kind of hole of black hole of research, about this amazing, phenomenon in the wild, which then kind of triggered this whole story idea, which happened in kind of this really amazing rush, which most of my books do not come that way. This came in about 15 minutes as I went for a walk, and I suddenly knew that it was going to be about a woman who was reintroducing the wolves, and that she would be fighting against the kind of locals. I knew that there would be a murder, and that she would try to kind of hide this murder from the town. But yeah, I just kind of became really fascinated with the incredible power that wolves have over their environment. They're a keystone species, which means that they have trickle down effects on all the other animals and plants in their landscape. And I also kind of find it astonishing that we could be, killing this creature, which is so misunderstood, and so essential to our environment. So yeah, I mean, that was one source of inspiration for me for this novel. That's where it all started, I think.
Well, that's amazing. I did not know that about the place in Utah.
Yeah, I know, I'm dying to go there, but right as I was sort of researching about all of this, the borders closed.
Yeah. Well, both of your adult novels, Migrations and Once There Were Wolves, contain a mystery of sorts and feature complex female characters who are dealing with their own personal trauma whilst being passionate about the climate crisis, environmental and ecological issues. It is a lot to pack into each book, especially considering that they're both under 300 pages, but your writing is so well done. The prose is so lyrical. They're both beautiful and unique stories. So, I mean, how do you weave it all together so well?
Oh God, that's the question, isn't it? I think, I mean, for me, I need to have quite a lot of juicy stuff to really sink my teeth into. It doesn't work for me to just have, I guess, one thing that I'm writing about. So I like to kind of, I guess, use the internal flaws and challenges that my character's going through and echo it in the world around her, so that there's kind of always that big outer issue that's going on in the world, as well as her internal struggle. And those things, I think, always need to kind of come back to use the same theme, or else, you know, you just start to feel like you get a really jarring, disconnected story. So that is one thing I would say, that no matter what kind of threads you're following, and I like to follow multiple threads, I like using multiple timelines and exploring different things. I always make sure they have some connection to the same theme. So for example, with wolves, I knew that I wanted to write about the wolves and the rewilding process, and I guess what humans are kind of doing to the planet, how we're having this really negative impact because of our own apathy, really. But I also wanted to write about this catastrophe that I was seeing happening all around me at the time, and it's still going on, which is the domestic violence issue that we've got going on in this globally. And so it took me a little while to work out how I would kind of be able to tell those two stories, or at least include them both in the one book without it feeling really dissonant. And I realized that fundamentally it comes down to empathy and lack of empathy. And both of those things could actually really sort of be about the same things. The harm that we're doing, not only to each other, but to our planet. How we could be capable of those sorts of things. Our strive for gentle compassion on the flip side of that kind of violence. So yeah, I guess threading that really fine line of violence and tenderness, and sort of, yeah, look, I think I don't know if that answered anything, but I think essentially threading it for me is I just have to feel my way through it. I don't like to plan too much of that sort of side out. I just have to try and make sure that it's always coming back to those same emotional thematics.
Wow, yeah. I mean, the violence and the empathy, it's kind of like two sides of the same coin, and you did that well. So you were talking about kind of feeling your way through the story. One of the questions that we love to ask authors is, you know, how do you sit down to write a book? Do you plot it all out? Do you just kind of know where you want to end up? Do you write it linearly? What's your process look like?
Yeah, I'm a bit of both. I'm kind of a pantser and a plotter. I will always start out with a sense of where I'm going, where I want to end up. I like to plan, I guess, my major sort of key turning points out, and usually I like to have at least 6 of those throughout a sort of 3-act structure. And this is my screenwriting training that's coming in now. This is sort of why I guess I approach it in this way. But as long as I have those 6 kind of key moments for my character, I really like to just allow her to kind of lead me through the rest of it. So I guess it's having a bigger overall picture combined with just letting my characters guide me through and exploring as I write. You know, it's a bit of, I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but it's so true to say that, you know, we really feel like our characters do write their own stories, and that's sort of the joy, I think, the undiscovered moments and the surprising things that you never sort of would have predicted. I love that. That's where the real joy for me kind of lives. So I would definitely say that, you know, it's a bit of both. And if I get stuck, I'll kind of come back out, and I might start sort of, you know, writing up my scenes into on little cards and stick them up on the walls and start sort of moving them around. And, you know, you can kind of get out of some holes if you do it that way. But mostly I like to just sort of feel my way through.
Okay. Seems organic that way.
Yeah, I think so.
Jennifer Lynn wanted to know, after you submitted the first draft of the story, how intense was the editing process, and did much of the story change from the first draft to what we ended up reading?
In Wolves, it was a good process. It wasn't too involved. I would say there are a few kind of bigger, more structural changes. Like, for example, initially in my first draft, uh, when Inti stumbles upon the body, that actually happened. I think at the moment it happens almost halfway in the book, but originally it was a lot earlier in the story. But my wonderful editor kind of pointed out that we hadn't really had a chance to kind of get into get to know the town's characters at that point, and that it wouldn't have as much of an impact if we hadn't sort of spent a bit of time with them and got to kind of know where the conflict was, and what the sort of underlying challenges might be for Inti once she discovered that body. I was very happy to be told that I needed to kind of work on the romance and add a little bit more in about that, because I'm such a romantic at heart, but I guess I was kind of holding back a little bit on this one for some reason, and maybe just, I don't know, feeling a bit shy. And then my editor kind of pointed out, no, I think we need to, have a bit more on the romance side. A little bit more kind of maybe exploration of Aggie, the sister. So they were kind of the key things I think that came out. But most of what you read now was in that first draft, I would say.
Well, without giving too much away, just as a comment to Aggie, you definitely had me questioning whether she was real or not real.
Yeah.
So you threaded that line really well.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad.
Danielle wanted to know, have you always been into environmental and animal issues?
Well, actually, no. I would say that a lot of my earlier work when I was younger, I think it wasn't such a part of the conversation a couple of decades ago. And yeah, I think I originally was just mostly writing as escapism and to have adventures from the kind of safety of my bedroom, really. But then I think I kind of reached a point. Would have been in my mid-20s when I started thinking about migrations, and I'd been traveling around and kind of noticing I was specifically in the UK, and I was noticing all the beautiful migratory birds, and again, once I started to look into them and learn about them a bit more, I was kind of shocked at the struggles that they're facing going on these enormous, amazing kind of long haul migrations from one end of the planet to the other, and how those flights are becoming more and more difficult because of what we're doing to their environments, to their habitats, to their food sources. And it just struck me as kind of really tragic, and that there's so many birds that don't even kind of survive their migrations anymore. And then I read this other article that was kind of about how, very soon we may not have any animals left because of what we're doing to the planet. And it just really struck me as devastating, tragic. I kind of couldn't put words to how awful that image of a world without animals would be, and how lonely it would be. So that was kind of where that book started from. And I think, I don't know, it opened something up in me. I think a passion that I have for wanting to, I guess, reconnect with nature and with the wild, and looking at how doing that, it can be so nourishing and healing for us. I just find that really quite beautiful, that idea. So it probably will be something that I'll be continuing to write about in one form or another, even if it's just a background kind of I always like to center human stories. But I do, it is something that I feel quite passionately about now.
Yeah. Well, both of these novels kind of had like an environmental dystopian type of feel to it. And
Yeah.
listening to you explain it, it's kind of like, why aren't more people paying attention to this? And so I love reading the fiction that you've created, because I hope that maybe it piques somebody's curiosity to go out and actually look into things for themselves. So,
Absolutely. I really do hope that. I mean, there is lots of great fiction that's touching on the environmental crisis at the moment. But yeah, I think I guess maybe if you're not so tapped into that, you might not be as aware of it as others. But it's a great kind of world to venture into, because there's something really, I guess, fundamentally human about our connection to the natural world, and it always kind of, I think that gives way to really good stories.
definitely. Well, the first line of the book read, "When we were 8, Dad cut me open from throat to stomach," and it was a jolting way to open the story. And then we go on to learn that the main character, Inti, has the rare condition of mirror touch synesthesia, which means she feels physical sensations experienced by other people and animals. When a wolf tears into flesh, she feels the hunger and tastes the blood in her mouth. Was there a particular reason that you chose to include this condition in the book?
Well, it was something that I had learnt about a long time ago, or some years ago, and I was very fascinated with it the second I kind of heard this podcast about it, about the condition. I myself have a very mild case of synesthesia. It's not mirror touch; it's a different type. It's basically my memory works by connecting color and texture and shape. So, for example, if I were to try and remember your name, I would have to remember that it's yellowish white with an outline of black. um, so, I guess I was kind of always a little bit aware of slightly non-typical ways of thinking about or perceiving the world. And so it felt natural to me to kind of want to use this amazing condition in something or other, but it kind of never really made itself feel quite right for any of the stuff I was working on until this book came along. And I realized that a character with incredibly heightened empathy would be perfect for a book that was thematically about empathy and lack of empathy and what it does to us. And she kind of has this very complex relationship with her condition, wherein she kind of can't really decide whether it's a gift or a curse. And so I guess I really like the idea of exploring that and exploring the vulnerability that comes with empathy, and why that can be so frightening for us, even though it's sort of the most important thing I think we can experience on this planet.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was not aware of the condition before I read the book, and I thought it was really integral to the story. And I
Yeah.
liked to hear the reason why you chose to include that in this book particularly.
It
Um,
did feel like it had to go in.
mhm. I loved that each of the wolves in the book, they kind of seemed to have their own personality, and you really brought them to life. How much / what sort of research did you do for this book, and what did the process look like?
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that I discovered when I was doing my research. I really immersed myself in reading about the reintroduction project in Yellowstone in the 90s. They brought a whole lot of wolves back to back to the national park there, where they had previously been hunted to extinction. And you can read all these fantastic first person accounts from the biologists that worked on the projects. And what really struck me was just the kind of unbelievable uniqueness of the wolves and their personalities and their almost humanness, and this sort of the individual stories that they had and the adventures that they went on, and you read about them and you can't help kind of falling in love with them. So I knew that I really needed to kind of make my wolves characters in their own right, in a way. I wanted us to kind of love them and grieve over them and root for them, which you do when you learn about real wolves in real life, because they're just such incredible creatures. So that was kind of a big part of the research for me, was learning about that, reading about that, reading about wolves, reading about people who work with wolves. I went to Scotland to kind of explore the landscape there and to try and get my head around how it would feel, or how it might be if there were wolves there and the forest was kind of coming back to life. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful country there. It's very inspiring, just kind of being in somewhere that's so, I guess one of the things that you really feel when you go to Scotland is that it's kind of the weather, and the weather is just wild. You get sort of crazy wind hurricanes happening on the top of a mountain at one second, and then you'll turn around and it'll be sunny and kind of beautiful, and there'll be birds of prey just landing on the trees near you. It's sort of, you can't quite wrap your head around how fundamental the landscape is there. So that was another big part of the research that I did, in kind of getting into that sort of headspace of the moody noir setting.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. Your description of Scotland, you said hurricanes on a mountain one day and then sunny the next. And I'm thinking to myself, well, but for the mountains, you're kind of describing Texas Gulf
Oh,
Coast.
really?
Hurricanes one day and it's sunny the next. So
Yeah, wow.
not quite as moody as the Scotland that portrayed, but
Oh, I'm sure it has its moments.
yeah, definitely. Michelle Murphy wanted to know if you got to spend any time with actual wolves before you wrote this.
No, I didn't. I would love to. It's definitely on my bucket list. I've seen them in like wildlife parks, but I've never seen any in the wild. It's quite a rare thing, I think, to witness wolves in the wild. You can do it if you're very, very lucky in Yellowstone, but like I said, I couldn't get to America by that time. We don't have any in Australia. We have dingoes, which are kind of our equivalent predator, which is actually going through the same issue at the moment. We're killing them off, and the environment's really suffering because of it. Anyway, that's a long way of saying no.
We had a question in the chat. Did Never Cry Wolf serve as inspiration or research for your book? She read that in high school and it has stayed with her for over 25 years later. Your book felt like a fictional version of that for me.
Oh, wow. No, I haven't read Never Cry Wolf. I haven't actually even heard of it. But it sounds like something I should be reading for sure. So I'm going to put that on my list. Thank you.
Yeah, check it out. So both of the book, both Migrations and Once There Were Wolves, have focused on conservation to different extents. And, conservation is a complex issue. And I think that you did a great job not making one side of the discussion overtly the villain, but you have highlighted that the people most affected by the conservation efforts are the people that rely on the land and wolves and the sea and migrations to make their livelihood. Do you have any thoughts on the best way forward, or what did your books have to say about that?
Oh God. Well, thank you for kind of pointing out that it's very complex. I think I'm probably hyper aware of it because my dad is a cattle farmer and a sheep farmer, and I'm a vegetarian. So we're quite different in our kind of, I guess, views on that sort of thing. But I think one of the things that's really important to me is when I write about this stuff, I certainly don't feel like I have an answer to it, but I do feel like it's important to write with not by blaming people or kind of creating more of a division, but instead with writing with a sense of togetherness, because I do think that's kind of going to be the only way that we're able to move forward. I think we have to start helping each other bear the burden of this. It is rural people who bear that burden mostly when we're talking about reclaiming land and needing to rewild it. You know, we don't feel that burden in the cities, and it's very easy to kind of say that, you know, all our land should be returned to the wild, and I do actually think that it should be, but you know, there will be people who suffer if that's the case, and I think we need to start thinking of ways to support them, and yeah, help bear the brunt of this issue, and just to keep talking, to keep kind of listening to each other and understanding each other and educating ourselves, because it is really complex, and it's kind of, yeah, it's a very difficult thing to sort of see a way through. I mean, mostly we need our leaders to be guiding us through this, and unfortunately in a lot of places they're not doing that. They're certainly not doing it in Australia. We have a shocking government that does not support you know, rewilding or any kind of forward thinking in terms of saving this planet. So yeah, I think I would say that's one thing we need to be doing, is thinking about who we're voting into power.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, it all comes back to having empathy, and hopefully the people in power having empathy. So
That's right, and not greed.
agreed. The wolves weren't the only thing in the process of being rewild in this book. Inti believes that she basically belongs in the forest in some form or fashion. And then you had people rewilding plants in their garden, you know, doing their parts, which reminded me of one of my favorite passages from the book that went, and when you open your heart to rewilding a landscape, the truth is you're opening your heart to rewilding yourself. I love that passage. This was a book that I highlighted a lot. What do you hope that readers take away from Once There Were Wolves?
I hope maybe that it inspires them to embrace that idea of rewilding. And I think, you know, it's a broad term, but when maybe, to me, I think what it means is, when I talk about rewilding myself or a character or all of us, I think it's about finding a sense of harmony with the natural world around us. It's something that I think we have lost. And it's really profoundly important to reconnect with that, to find this sort of compassion, the generosity of spirit, the kindness that exists within the natural world, and to take those things on for ourselves. So I hope that that's something that readers are inspired by. I hope it inspires them to kind of look around us and see all the things in the world that we haven't yet lost, and how important it is to fight for those things. I hope it energizes them. You know, we're going to need energy now to act and to make change. We will need hope. I hope it fills people with hope. And I just hope it kind of reconnects them with what they love in nature, really.
Yeah. The term rewilding, this is kind of the first time that I have read about it in a book, and I your explanation right there, I love the idea of it. So
Yeah, it's a beautiful idea, I think. And I hope that it's something, you know, it's happening all over the world with these kind of conservation projects, but it's lovely to think that it can be happening sort of in our own lives as well.
you did a wonderful job examining human nature and nature itself, showing that we aren't so different from the wild animals that we share the planet with. What do you think humans can learn from the way that the wolves interact with each other and with their environment?
Well, that was another thing that really struck me. The beautiful thing about wolves is that they're family oriented. You know, they kind of live and die for their family, for their pack. They're incredibly loyal. And actually, the wolves that we would term alphas are in fact now being referred to as the breeding pair, because in fact the dominance of a wolf is not kind of down to how savage or violent or physically dominant they can be over the rest of their pack. It's actually about their ability to have pups and to breed and to kind of lead a family. So that's kind of something really beautiful, I think, that we can kind of take on, that actually this very misunderstood animal, which I guess we think about wolves as being the villains of fairy tales and folklore, and being these kind of savage, dangerous creatures, when in fact they're very shy, more often than not gentle and family oriented creatures. So, I think that's something that we can kind of take a lot of inspiration from, living in harmony with our families, our packs, the people around us, but also our environments. They have this beautiful effect on every other living creature in their environments. So yeah, it does come back to that idea of harmonizing with what's around us, and that sense of, I guess, helping our environment rather than hindering it.
We had a few comments coming in that said, just want to say what spectacular books you've written. Thoroughly enjoyed this and migrations. Learned so much by reading these books and made me feel so in love with nature and the wilderness. I already can't wait for the next book. And Melissa said, love it too. One of my few 5-star reads of the year, giving it to her mom for a gift this holiday season.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's lovely.
Melissa, I am actually going to give this to my brother for Christmas because he loves wolves. He's always loved
Great.
wolves, so I think he'll
That's
love this book
awesome.
too.
Yeah, great.
Laura Beth wanted to know if you had to give a library / bookstore a genre besides general fiction, where do you think that this book should be shelved?
Oh, yeah, good question. It kind of defies genre a little bit. I think it's a mix of, I guess, crime. It could fit into crime. It could also fit into, I guess, nature writing. I don't know. It's kind of a mix of nature writing, crime, just family drama, I guess. Yeah, I think it has to just go in fiction because it's too many things all at once.
It definitely is all of the things, but I loved it. So, so we're switching gears for a bit. For those of us who have read and loved Migrations, can you give us any update on where the film adaptation process is and how involved are you in that process?
I wish I had more exciting news to tell you, but I don't have a lot. I know that they've got a director and a screenwriter on board, so they're no doubt working away at the screenplay at the moment, which is, the first step in the process. They can't really get any financing until they've got a screenplay. So it's still a ways away before we have any kind of, solid info. I would love to be more involved, but unfortunately I sold my rights, which is what tends to happen when you kind of, a producer just sort of buys the rights and then they just do their own thing. I am in the works with, for Once There Were Wolves, and something being a little bit more involved in whatever happens, which I can't really say too much about, but there's stuff in the works, and I would ideally love to be writing on that project. So I hope that I have more exciting news about both of those at some point for you all.
We definitely have our fingers crossed that these both actually make it to the big screen, because when I was reading this book, I mean, your writing is just so beautiful that it played like a movie in my head. I could see every scene, and I would be really excited too.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see them up on the big screen. I feel like they would adapt quite well, but it's hard to get stuff made, so we'll just cross our fingers.
Yeah, you're right. It is. But we who read all of the books, we get so excited anytime we see, oh, it's somebody bought the rights. We're like, okay, let's get
Come
this.
on. Yeah.
We've had so many comments just coming in saying how much they loved your book. Both were ones that they couldn't put down. The writing was so beautiful. Like, all of the comments are in this chat. The love is real for you, Charlotte.
Thank you. That's so lovely.
So, tell us, what did your path to publishing look like when you decided to make the switch from YA to adult novels? What did that look like for you?
So where was I? I was in London at the time. I was living there. I had this kind of idea in my head that I wanted to write, but I didn't get there very directly. It was kind of a weird route to get there. Um, I had another book before Migrations, which was it was my actual first foray into writing for adults. And it was this really weird kind of romance fiction hybrid, which didn't quite know what it was, but it was, I guess, the my first exploration of writing for adults. And I used that book to get my agent, Sharon, who I love. She kind of picked that up and saw something in it. But she quite rightly pointed out that perhaps my writing could be put to better use with a different story. And did I have anything else? And so I sort of thought to myself, well, I've got this very early germ of an idea, which wound up being Migrations. Should I go away and write that? She said, yes, definitely. So I went away, and I think I spent maybe 2 years after that working on the draft, and then got that back to her. We did a little bit of tinkering together, and then she sent that out to editors. And I was very lucky that one of them loved it. That was my editor at Flatiron, Carolyn Blakey. And she picked up the book, and the rest is history. We've just had a really great working relationship ever since. So yeah, a lot of luck, a lot of trying things, and being able to kind of shift gears. And it was important to be able to shelve that book, to know that that wasn't the right thing to kind of, I guess, make my debut with, and not to kind of hold on to it too tightly. I think that it's a really good thing to be able to know when something's kind of done its dash, and you should just move on. But you also need to be really persistent and kind of patient with stuff, because it can take a really long time. That whole period took a few years before anything came of it.
Well, I know, Wolves just came out in August, but because we've devoured both of the books already, can you tell us what you're currently working on and where you're at in the process with that? What kind of details can you give us to hold us over?
Yeah, sure. It's so I am working on I guess a third, and I guess in my mind I'm sort of looking at them as a bit of a trilogy of sorts. This novel will be set on a sub-Antarctic island between Australia and Antarctica. It's about a man and his 3 children living on this kind of tiny island, the caretakers of this island, as the sea levels are rising quite rapidly, and obviously due to melting ice caps, and they are quite surprised one night to find a woman's body washing up on shore, and to find her alive. And they don't know who she is or why she's there, and she's got lots of secrets and mysteries, and they've got things that they're not telling her. And basically it's going to be a love story, a story of kind of found family. It's about raising children in a dying world and what our responsibilities are around that. And again, the healing power of our environments and nature, and what we've got to kind of do to save this planet.
Well, it sounds like we need a pre-order link already with the chat.
Well, I hope it's good. I haven't quite written it yet. I'm in the trenches at the moment, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, just, when you can get somebody excited just by that little bit of a teaser, I think you're on the right track. So we can't wait to see it come to fruition. Well, Charlotte, it's been my greatest pleasure speaking with you tonight. We always like to wrap up our chats by asking our guests, what are you currently reading? Do you have any recommendations that you'd like to share with the group?
Yes, I am currently reading Night Bitch, which is this fantastic book. I'm loving it, actually. And it's probably quite topical for me at the moment because I've just had a baby, but I think it will appeal to anyone. It's about a mother of a young child, and how she's kind of struggling with raising this little boy on her own, and then at night she starts to morph into a rabid carnivorous dog. So it's strange. It's very strange, but it's really great. It's amusing. It's witty. It's very relatable for any mum, which is, I'm sure this group is probably right onto that. Yeah, so I would highly recommend that one.
Yeah, definitely. I've read that, the loss of identity, the motherhood struggles. It was very relatable. But like you said, I mean, she does literally change into a dog. So I feel like some people might be like, what is going on? But I thought it was a good book too. So.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor. You've just got to see it as that, I guess, if you can't get on board with the actual animal morphing.
Well, fantastic. I will definitely make sure that everybody knows to check out that Night Bitch. Was there anything else that you'd like to recommend, or?
Two of my other favorite books from this year. The first one was 123 by Laurie Frankel, which was another kind of look at, I guess, what's happening, or how a big company has affected this small town by poisoning its water. And it's a really kind of warm, generous look at people and our relationships with each other. And I reckon the third book I would recommend is one that hasn't come out yet, but it'll be out soon. It's called Yerba Buena by Nina LaCour. It's her first adult novel, and it's just a very kind of also warm, very loving story about a relationship and the kind of, I guess, the small moments of sweetness and delight in a life. So I found both of those books really quite nice to read during a difficult year.
All right. Well, we will definitely put these out to our members and let them know that that's what you're reading and recommending. Charlotte, thank you again so much for joining the Peloton Moms Book Club tonight. We wish you much continued success with wolves and migrations, and we really can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. And it's just been a real pleasure.
All right. Well, you take care. Have a good night. Good morning.
Yeah, you too. Bye.